Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Amalia Bastos, a comparative psychologist who's done a ton of research regarding dogs with buttons. We'll talk about her findings so far, what's to come, and a controversial opinion or two. I I matched the wood. We're good. Can blend right
Oh,
in.
yeah, you
Okay,
do. That
I
you
do.
do.
It's very strange. Okay. Hello, Amalia. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I'm really excited to have this chat. I've been doing a lot of these conversations with members of the community who have their own dogs or cats that are learning buttons. And your position is a little bit different as you are one of the few that are conducting the research that is so important to our growth as a community. So thank you. I'm very excited to have you here.
Thank you, Alexis. Happy to be here too. I love that we're having this chat. We can talk all things dog buttons and maybe some cat buttons as well. Who knows?
Absolutely. I would be really interested to hear sort of uh, what you do, who you are, and how you got involved with buttons to begin with.
Yeah. I'm a comparative psychologist, which is just a really fancy way of saying I study how animals think, animals that are not humans, that is, although sometimes there's humans involved. I'm a lecturer in comparative psychology at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. And that's a position I came to recently. I first came upon the button thing when I was finishing my PhD, and there was this really mysterious sounding advertisement for an internship saying that they were looking for animal cognition scientists or comparative psychologists, same thing, to investigate these dogs that were pressing buttons. And at that point, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know what the buttons were. And I sort of started looking through Instagram because it mentioned that it was a social media phenomenon. I was astounded by what I saw. I didn't realize that this was out there. And I remember not sleeping that night after I applied for the internship because I was so excited to work on it, hopefully.
That's amazing. And was this internship at the Comparative Cognition Lab at UCSD with
That's
Dr.
right.
Federico Rossano? Okay.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was UCSD, and we also had the contact at FluentPet. So we worked with them as well. So they could sort of help provide the infrastructure to like gather the data. That was before Connect ever happened, but we were already sort of like having conversations around that.
Yeah. So at that point, people were self reporting with like pencil on paper, every single button that was pressed. It was like a small group of pilot
Yeah.
testers, right? And so they were
Right.
reporting, okay, dog pressed, want ball, go outside. And then they'd like send that to the comparative cognition lab. And on the FluentPet side, we were sort of trying to think about how could we make data collection more systematic and easier and scalable. Yeah. So obviously you got the internship. Very exciting.
Luckily.
Yes. Did you hear? So you didn't sleep that night. And then did you hear back soon enough that you didn't miss too many nights of sleep?
I heard back, I think maybe a week later or so for an interview. And I think I was offered the internship the day after the interview. But at some point without you do need to sleep at some point. So you stay awake as much as you can, your body shuts down. So it wasn't
Yeah,
too much
yeah.
a lot of nights, thankfully.
Good, good, good. And so then what happened? What were the things that you were really interested in knowing? Obviously you had studied comparative cognition, so you were aware of the prior animal language studies and sort of some of the flaws in those studies. And what were your takeaway from those prior studies? Like what did you think we could do better here? And maybe this is where there wasn't success that's unrecognized or unrealized or whatever.
I will say, as a teenager, one thing that really inspired me to get into the field was Irene Pepperberg's books. So both Alex and Me, but also the more like textbooky one that she's published, the Alex studies. And so I've had a good understanding of that field and what it entailed already. And I think that it's both extremely exciting what they were trying to do at the time, but also kind of misguided because there was no precedent, right? They're just trying to answer this question, but no one's done it before. There's no established protocols to follow. And so I can't blame them really for the mistakes that were made. It's just a shame that the field sort of dissolved so quickly from really interpersonal disagreements between scientists because the underlying science that we can do with mixed interspecies communication is really cool. It's just going about it the right way.
Yeah, for sure. So looking back on that, what were some of the questions that you were really eager to be able to answer?
Yeah. So I was really interested in intentional communication, whether animals actually are trying to communicate something to us or whether they're just using us as vending machines. I think that's the first critical question. I think we have made sort of a good head start on answering that. I also am interested in more linguistic questions like productivity and whether, they're combining things in ways that haven't been modeled to them before. The reason we haven't published anything on that yet is that it's surprisingly difficult to do. It sounds like a very simple thing to test, but it's actually not, because you have to have evidence that that combination has never been modeled before, and that includes both through buttons and verbally. So it is incredibly hard to prove that is completely novel. So, but it's a very interesting question.
That's interesting. How would you go about proving that? Like, how would you design a study around that?
Yeah, with productivity, we'd probably have to set up a situation where, a combination of words makes sense in a particular experimental context that we artificially create. And it would never make sense for like the honors to say those words together outside of that context. So it's something that would experimentally coerced out of the dog, if you like, or the cat. You'd have to experimentally induce it to show that there's something there. And that's something that, hopefully we'll get to do in the near future, but it's certainly a lot further than it sounds, because the weight of the scientific evidence, has to be so certain that this is novel for you to say that it's productive.
Yeah, of course. And then you've got to go from home to home and to home and trial all of that, which just takes a lot of time. And you got to find the right people and the right diets.
Exactly. I mean, there's also citizen science. So like one thing that we're leaning quite heavily into is doing citizen science, which means, sending instructions to honors, maybe having a Zoom call where you explain things or go through them and they run the study themselves in their homes. That is, more sort of cost-effective and time-effective way to get a larger number of participants without me having to fly all over the US, as I have done in the past, visiting like 30 different dogs' homes. So there are better, easier ways to do it for some experiments.
Yeah. Let's save you a year of your life, maybe.
Exactly.
Just, maybe. I'm curious, the studies that you were doing when you spent that year flying around to various users of buttons, can you tell us about that study, what it was for, how it went, what the results were?
Yeah, so the first study that we ran was an in-person study and a citizen science study, so it was a mixture. For the in-person component, I was actually going to people's homes, and we were putting colored stickers on people's boards on 4 buttons in particular: a button for outside concept, a button for a food concept, one for a play concept, and a new button that was introduced to the board that day, which was daxing. It was supposed to mean absolutely nothing to the dog, and that's a control. So something that we do in science is we have control conditions where you're not supposed to see anything, and that's kind of the entire point. So I was going to people's homes. The other researcher, who happens to be my husband, was putting these stickers on. I was waiting outside their house, and then I'd come in, put noise canceling headphones on, and touch one of these buttons. And the headphones meant that I had no idea what I was pressing. So I was basically pressing a button because I knew which color to press, but I didn't know what that color was because it varied for every dog. And then I just froze for a minute and we just see what the dog did. And after the fact, we had someone who also didn't know what the button was, but most importantly, didn't even know what the experiment was about. That was coding what the dog's behaviors were. So the goal was, do the dogs show behaviors that are associated to that button meaning when we press that particular button without any other cues? So for example, if I press play, are they going to be more likely to go get a toy than they are run to the door, for example? And the reason for that, it seems very simple, because what we're showing is that dogs are actually mapping these words onto meanings, right? So they're learning these associations, which is something, babies do when they're learning language. It's the very first step of a symbolic system. But people were so skeptical about it, both like scientists and people on the internet. They were like, these dogs don't know what these buttons mean. Maybe they're just pressing things randomly. They're just doing it for treat. These people are like feeding them every time they press something and they're making up meanings. And we're like, that can't be it. Surely dogs can, learn the meanings of very concrete things. We need to prove that first before we can do anything else. So that was the goal of that experiment. So what we saw is that the dogs were behaving appropriately for the outside button and the play button. We didn't see a significant difference for the food button, but I don't think it's because they don't understand what food is. I think it's because dogs are just so food motivated. They show food related behaviors all the time. And also
Mm.
more often they're like non-meal times, right? So I might show up to someone's house at like 10 a.m. and the dog is in between meals or had just had their breakfast and won't eat again until dinner. Why on earth would they expect that something will happen when I press food? And so we saw less there, but we definitely found very good evidence for play and outside.
That is so fascinating. And why do you suspect that so many people were so skeptical of a thing that feels quite obvious to many of us in the community?
Yeah, I think there's something in the human brain. I'm saying this colloquially. There's something in the human brain that gets really annoyed when language comes into the conversation, right? Because we like to think that language is exclusive to us, and therefore things like words will be exclusive to us. But there's no reason whatsoever why words would be any harder to associate with outcomes than, say, different beeps, right? There's no reason why it's any better than a tone. And there's no reason why using words as a symbol is special in any way.
Mhm.
But I think people get really defensive about language and words and labels, and they don't want to ascribe that to animals, even though there's no good reason, scientifically speaking, to separate words out from any other symbol that you might use.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, it's just words are just arbitrary sounds to
Right.
which we've associated meanings, right? And I think there is something exactly like you said, so very human centric about the word language that feels very much like ours, like it belongs to us, right? And I found out early on that if I used the word language, I would get in a lot of trouble online. So I can't, we call it communication. And to
Yep.
me, and maybe this might not be the case for you. To me, the uh, an interesting question is this language? But the most interesting question to me is how does this change the way humans listen?
Yeah.
Right? Because what I'm seeing in the community as a non-scientist is that it's changing relationships. You know, whether it's language, whether it's, I mean, it's obviously communication. Language is a system of communication. But what I see happening is that when an animal, when a non-human uses a word in our language to communicate with us, something in our brain switches a little bit. Like it
Yes.
turns on and we're like, oh, maybe they've got something to say. Oh, they're speaking to me in English. Language is exclusively human. I've got to listen to them as though they were a human. I've got to grant them the same agency, choice, and control as I would a small child. That for me is one of the most compelling and interesting bits. Just seeing how that has the capacity to transform relationships.
I couldn't agree more with you. So, like, one thing that we hear a lot is, oh, but I can tell exactly what my dog wants just from their behavior and looking at them. And I always say, good for you. I'm very happy for your dog. However, the number of dog bites that there are every year, right, where people end up in urgent care,
Mhm.
that means that people are not reading dog body language correctly because dogs show you a million signs before they go in for a bite. And if so many people are getting bit, it's because we can't understand their body language that well. And I think there's something about when they start using our symbolic communication system, right? When they start using our words from our language, that something in us just sort of goes on, like a light goes on in our heads, and we're like, oh, wow, this being is actually trying to say something. Maybe I should pay attention. And so, um, one of the things I'm really, really interested in actually, as well as the cognition, is what are the welfare and husbandry implications of having this sort of communication system with other animals and how can that we use that to help them? Because they've helped us a lot. They've helped us a lot with, understanding how their brains work. And I'm sure they'll continue to help us understand how their minds work through buttons. But what can we give back to them through this communication system?
100%. One of the things that I think is most powerful that we're seeing a lot of right now is the animal self advocacy, where non-humans are requesting medication, right? Like I've got a belly ouch, or I've got an ear ouch, and that to me is so powerful because evolutionarily, obviously, it's adaptive to not show pain, right? So there are so many animals that are in high degrees of pain that aren't showing any symptoms. So for them to be able to then, you don't necessarily have to show it. I don't have to be able to see it because you can tell me specifically where and when and how you're in pain and what medicine you want, or if you want to go to the vet, and just having that predictability around those husbandry aspects too. Like us being able to say, okay, clean ear, and the cat or the dog or the other species being prepared for that verbally just can reduce anxiety so much. So I think from
Completely agree.
a welfare standpoint, there is just huge, huge, huge potential here. And back to what you were saying about, something sort of switching in our brains and the body language saying some of the feedback and the criticism that I hear a lot, especially from the behavior community, is that we are using buttons to the exclusion of natural, intrinsic communicative styles, right? And what I see happening is that because I didn't know anything about behavior when I started
Mm.
teaching Bunny. I was just like, oh, my dog's gonna say I love you. How cute, right? But anyways, once she started using this system, exactly what we were talking about, this light went on. I was like, I gotta start paying attention because there's something going on here that I didn't necessarily expect. I thought this would be cute, but this is real and this is big and this changes everything. And so I started really paying attention to how she was communicating all the time because in order for a non-human to use this high response effort behavior, we've got to make sure that we are choosing concepts, words that are salient to their experience, right? If I was not putting things on the board that Bunny was interested in communicating about, she just wouldn't. So we have to be paying attention to the body language to a high degree. It's like a reciprocal process that sort of scaffolds on itself.
Completely agree. So, like, not only having the body language alongside the communication might help the owner understand more, right? So, if your dog just presses concerned, you might not know without the accompanying body language what it is they're concerned about, for example. But also, I think it's a really, really irrational argument to say that the buttons are substituting natural behavior, right? Because this natural behavior is innate to the animal. You can't train it out of existence, right? You can suppress it, but you can't make it go away because these are things that they're born with. And so it's never going to be the case that because they have buttons, all of a sudden they are no longer, putting their tails behind their legs or putting their ears back, because these are things that are so innate to the animal and so natural to them that it's almost impossible for you to stop them from doing it. So I see it as an additional layer that's there to help humans understand what they're trying to communicate with us, helping them make maybe their requests clear to the stupid humans who don't understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
But it's not a substitution, right? We've seen this in studies that we've run. So there's the impossible task study, for example. And one of the dogs that was successful at it, we see so clearly in the video, the dog attempts the natural body language response first. And only then does the dog go to the button. So it's not like we're just deleting, the natural behavior the dog has. It's actually impossible to do that, biologically impossible.
And I would argue too that there is an increase in species typical behavior now in a lot of these learners, which is a marker of welfare, right? Because people are adding dig buttons, chase buttons, like behaviors that are intrinsic to the sort of ethological profile of the canine species, right? So we're increasing these behaviors that are natural to them, that we might not have even known about before, right? Because we've given them some words, we've given them a want maybe, and they say, blah, we're like, what do you want? What do you want? And then they go dig. Okay, we give them a dig button. Now they can advocate for that species typical behavior without having to engage in a behavior that potentially annoys us first,
Exactly. I've seen beautiful examples of this. So there was a dog I saw recently who had a destroy button, I think it was, and that means they want a cardboard box, and like, how would the owner have known beforehand that the dog needed to tear into something in that moment?
Yeah.
Except maybe the dog would tear into their couch and then they would get really upset. But that step has now been removed because the dog had the way to express, well, actually, I really need a cardboard box right now. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, watching your dog dig in the yard or tear something up, without first having that sort of like, may I,
Right.
could be perceived as bad behavior, right? And I think this is sort of like a bridge to that. It's like, I need to behave in this way. Please, may I behave in this way? It's like a child politely asking to, I don't know. I actually don't know what species typical behaviors are for human children. Only dogs. But it's a bridge to some of these behaviors that I think otherwise could be labeled bad behaviors. And now it's a healthy behavioral repertoire that is adding or increasing the welfare of everyone involved, right? Because if our dogs are happier, if our dogs or cats are more enriched, we are happier because they're not going to be engaging in behaviors that annoy us. Or
Right.
because we will have a better understanding that this is a need, right? This isn't just something that they're doing to annoy us. That's never the case. This is a behavior that already existed, like you said, that they need an opportunity to express, and now they can advocate for that instead of just expressing it in ways that make us insane.
No, that's exactly right. I think it changes the conversation between the human and the dog, and it changes the conversation on a broader level as well, where all these people are realizing, a community of humans that might not have known this before is realizing that animals have these needs and that they need to advocate for their animals expressing their needs. And that is actually a way to avoid behavioral problems in the home that might have arisen otherwise. So I think it's a whole sort of change in mindset that we're seeing, which is really, really nice to see.
I agree. It's a paradigm shift. Uh, what do you see as some of the biggest barriers towards that paradigm shift as we try and like grow in this community and move the needle forward and sort of balance the scales between humans and captive animals living together?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think that there are always going to be people who are really stuck in their ways and stuck in their beliefs. And I think sometimes you need first-hand experience as evidence. Like a lot of people won't just take, oh yeah, I saw a video on, Instagram of a dog advocating for itself, and I believe that this is a need that dogs have, and it's not a behavioral problem, right? Sometimes they have to have that experience themselves. So I think in some sort of areas of the dog community, this might be a slow conversation, a slow change, but I think
Yeah,
there's room there to expand, if you like, the change the mindset. I think of people who have dogs and what it is to what does it mean to be a guardian, to be a responsible guardian, to have a dog in your home, an animal from a different species that doesn't have the same needs as you, and sometimes you might not actually fully understand what their needs and wants are, and being able to improve our understanding of what these needs and wants might be if we just give them the tools to communicate about that. I think it's a beautiful thing, but it's a slow it's a slow change over time. I don't think it's gonna happen all at once.
I agree with you. And I mean, it's been what, 6 years now since we started?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely, I feel like I'm seeing the tide turn a little bit. There was a lot more controversy and rage around what we were doing at the beginning when the sample size was smaller, like five crazy people talking to their dogs. And now it's like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people having conversations and profound communications and changes in their relationships with dogs and cats and other species. And zoos are adopting the technology as well to facilitate enrichment, which is huge. I feel like we're on our way. I'm wondering what sorts of things, what sort of data do we need to really move that needle forward? And how are you gonna, what are next steps for you in that regard?
So I think, well, first of all, I'm hoping that science helps in the sense that the more we show that at least some of these animals are actually trying to communicate, are actually getting welfare benefits from this sort of thing, the more open-minded the community at large will be about. And I don't mean the community of people who already use AIC buttons; they already understand the value, right? I'm speaking about general people who study behavior, who study cognition, people who are professionals that work with dogs that might not have sort of seen the value with this yet. So I'm hoping that um, the more science we have to back this up, the easier it becomes. I feel like that's already a shift that we're starting to see. So I think that when the first papers came out, I feel like it sort of gave, the sort of button teachers a way to combat that sort of internet nonsense, the
Hmm.
trolls. Like, well, actually, researchers are working on this. They've shown this and that. Yeah, it's so far, and there's a lot still to come. But people are looking into this who have, the qualifications to say what this actually means. And they think there's something interesting there. So um, it is incremental science, though. I think it's really dangerous to take something like this and sort of start making huge claims, because then we run into the sort of potential trap of what's happened in the 60s and the 70s, right? Where we're sort of overblowing claims from, limited data or from one or two experiments that aren't sort of building upon each other. So I do think it's incremental science, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think cautious science is the best thing you can ask for in sort of context like the one that we have, where there is a huge controversial history to the field. So I think that, it's slow science and it's incremental science. So I think we're doing really good science. And I think that that's what's going to come out of it over time.
I love that. And it does seem like the grander the claims, the grander the pushback, right? Like
Yeah.
my dog is talking, Sissy's clever, Hans, there's no sort of, so like really keeping it even keel in the center and taking the small steps that amount to larger science, like you're saying, makes a lot of sense to me. What are some of the things that you would like to see and do next? Like, what are you working towards currently? Is that a good question? Or is that not the right question? What's the right
No,
question here?
I get the question. It's like hard to answer because there's so much. But one thing that I'm really, really interested in doing next is thinking about welfare and how we can measure welfare in
Okay.
soundboarding dogs, and whether we're actually seeing an improvement in welfare for dogs that have soundboards versus dogs that don't. So that is sort of like a very important study that we're starting data collection on very, very soon. I can't say more details because, there's a certain level to which we need to
Yeah.
keep the owner is naive to what we're doing, so they don't influence the study. But we do have a study coming up that's going to be related to welfare, and I think will be very, very valuable if we, fingers crossed, see what we think we're going to see there.
That is incredibly exciting. On that note, you have a lab.
I
You
do.
started your own lab. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So 7 months ago, I moved to Scotland. I've got a permanent position at St. Andrews University. So I'm opening my own lab, which is really exciting because it means I get to do whatever research I want. It's sort of a liberating phase in the life of every scientist where, suddenly you're in charge and you're like, oh, what crazy things can I do? Because I'm just allowed to do whatever I want now. And it's great. So yeah, I've got some amazing students under my belt already. I've got 2 master's students and 4 honors students. And I'm going to be bringing in a PhD student sometime very soon, by April, hopefully, all going well. So we're going to be doing lots of exciting research on soundboard using dogs, non-soundboard using dogs. And then there's some stuff with apes on the side as well. So some primate work, which is unrelated, but also very exciting.
Incredible. And what is the name of your lab and how can people find you?
Okay, so the lab that works with dogs is called a PAWS lab.
Pause Lab.
It stands for something. I can tell you what it is. I will need to find it because I did not come up with that acronym.
Oh, I just thought it was cute like dog paws, but it actually stands for something. That's amazing.
I think it means, hang on, let's find out. Because this lab is a cooperative lab between me. There you go. It's Pets Assisting with Science Lab. Poet Lab.
Amazing. That's amazing. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. It's so good.
So yeah, I co-coordinate that with Joseph Cole and Matilda Carpenter. They are huge names in comparative cognition and developmental psychology, respectively. So like work with primates and dogs and babies. And the PAWS lab is specifically for dogs. There is both in-person work where dogs come into the lab, we play fun games with them, and then we send them on their merry way home with their owners. And that's dogs are based like in Scotland nearby.
Yeah.
But then we also have a lot of citizen science studies where we do things over Zoom or we send videos out and get instructions, and then we look at the videos that owners submit. So it's a whole gamut of different experiments that we can run.
That's incredible. It's very exciting. I'll be sure to post the link and tag you underneath. And then you've got a study that you're recruiting people for right now, right?
That's right. Yeah. So this study is a little bit of a big ask, but I think that the research question justifies it. So the study is sort of a training study that's going to involve a problem-solving component. It will take about 2 to 3 weeks to participate in the study, where it's like 15 minutes a day of training your dog and taking videos of you training your dog. And it's a comparison between soundboard dogs and non-soundboard dogs and how they think. So that is the next thing that's coming up. I'm really, really excited for it. It's easy enough to do, and I think people are going to have fun with it, and they might actually learn a thing or two about their dogs and how they think as well while they're running it. So I think it'll be really fun.
That is very, very cool. Definitely will share that below as well.
Nice. Thank you.
Of course. Now, you also have a couple of dogs.
I do. I do.
Tell us about your dogs.
Yeah. So I have two Australian Shepherds, which, as most people know, they're a breed with a lot of energy and a lot of opinions and a lot of sass. And I love that about them. Not for everyone,
Yeah.
but I have a 3-year-old called Rohan, and I have a baby dog, 11 months, called Saffron, and they get along great. I mean, I will say Saffron loves Rohan a lot more than Rohan loves Saffron. Rohan tolerates Saffron is there. Saffron wants physical contact with Rohan the whole time.
Maybe when Saffron's a little bit older, Rohan will be like, okay, you're my bro now. But before you were just the annoying little puppy dog.
He's just kind of like in that annoying teenager phase, where it's like,
Yeah.
maybe I want to bite your feet, and then they a
Yes.
little bit, but he's a very lovely dog.
I love it. And do they use buttons?
So, Rohan, when he first came home at 8 weeks, we gave him buttons. He started with toilet, which is his word for outside. He had water, food, and play. And he went a really long time without pressing anything. And I was second guessing myself, Alexis, because I was thinking, hang on, I'm a researcher and I should know how this works. And I'm like modeling the heck out of these things. This dog isn't pressing anything. Is a dog dumb? Do I not know how this works? What's the deal?
Oh, no.
It was really funny. And this went on for several weeks until one day he just decided to just go ballistic on the buttons. And I think we recorded maybe 20 presses that day. It was just constant requests for stuff.
How many buttons did you have down?
We had 4 buttons at that point.
You have 4 buttons. Okay.
Yeah, and it was just, can you hear the squeaker, or are we good? Okay.
No.
Stop for the squeaking up over here.
Oh.
He really likes squeakers, which is bad for interviews. So yeah, Rohan just went ballistic on the buttons on that day, and he just maybe pressed 15, 20 times. We actually have a montage of like all the times he pressed that day, where like my husband and I just cannot get any work done because we sit at the desk, and he goes to the button, goes, play. Oh, play, great. Okay, so we go in mono play, we sit back again, play. Oh, all right, let's go. And then food, and so on and so forth. So it seems just like, come on, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, and something to maybe highlight to folks that are starting is like, one day your dog would just get it, and you might not expect that day to come, but they are paying attention to the modeling. They are keeping track of what you're doing. And one day they'll decide, let's press these buttons and see what they do, and you better be prepared.
Yeah.
Them with what they need.
So you said that was months after you had started modeling them, or?
It was several weeks. It was
Several weeks.
I
Yeah.
don't remember if it got into the sort of months territory, but it was a very long time. I was quite concerned that I was doing something wrong despite that research.
I feel like that's a common experience. That is not, I mean, a lot of people have that experience. And were you just focused on sort of naturalistic modeling? You weren't doing like sort of target training sessions and like, rapid modeling. You were just sort of like, we're going outside. I'm going to press the outside button. I'm going to stay outside. We're going to follow that with the activity kind of.
Yeah. I think I could have sped the process along if I had some target training. Like, this is a puppy that has very little motor coordination, right? Because no puppies know what they're doing with their leg, pretty much. So I think that might have been a reason why it took a really long time. But I wanted to do it just a naturalistic way to see how long that would take. So actually, like, I kept track of, I have the data.
Yeah.
I'll look at it at some point. We're working on that. But, I was very interested in how long is this actually going to take if there's no extra help, if it's just the dog has to figure it out for himself. And it took him several weeks and a lot of modeling for him to press for the first time.
Yeah. But even then, several weeks doesn't really feel like that long. You think about how long it takes a baby to use expressive language. Like, that's bananas. 3 weeks for, okay, you've got a non-human that is watching you like do this behavior, right? And make this sound come out of your mouth. 3 weeks later, they do the same behavior and the same sound and the same outcome. It's actually insane to think about. Yeah. So then after that happened, those 20 odd presses in that day, did you start adding a variety of other buttons? What happened after that?
Buttons. Yeah, we stuck with those buttons for a while because I really wanted to make sure that he understood what they were. Toilet, we went through an interesting journey with. So we would like, we would model
Don't
toilet.
we all?
I know, right? We would model toilet when he wasn't in to go outside. We'd take him outside and let him pee, etc. But at some point he decided, and this only lasted maybe 2 or 3 days, but he decided that toilet was his cue to let us know that it was time to clean up outside. So he would go outside and then come in and press toilet. And it's like, that's great, but you've now informed us that you've toileted rather than asked to go outside, which is not really how we model this. It was really funny, but sometimes he did it for peeing as well. So like, there's nothing we can do. And I think that behavior extinguished itself because he was just a bit confused. So like, I'm telling you like toileted and then you guys are like not doing anything about it. So toilet is actually probably the button he pressed the least.
Interesting. How do you have a theory about like how the transition in meaning to him happened around that?
I honestly, I don't know, because we used to press it, take him outside, and then he would toilet, we come back inside, no one presses anything. So you'd think that it would be clear enough that it's sort of, we're going to press this to show that we need to go toilet. For whatever reason, and I can't put my finger on why, he would press toilet after going. And maybe it was our mistake because we always left the door open because it was a secure area, so he couldn't have like fled or anything. So it was really interesting that he started like going outside, toileting, and then coming inside and letting us know. And we're like, that's good that you let us know. But really the goal was sort of the other way around. But okay. Yeah, after a few days of doing this, he just stopped. And I don't know if the behavior extinguished because we didn't do what he expected us to do. Like maybe he was just clean up immediately and he was annoyed that we weren't. So he gave up on that button or something. It was a really
so interesting.
Yeah.
It makes me things like that because it's not the first time I've heard about someone having that sort of experience with their learner, and it makes me wonder about the value of different types of communication. Like, what is the sort of reinforcement value of a request versus a narration? Like, what is the reinforcement value of just being heard, like speaking aloud, versus expressing a need and having that met? Yeah, it's just something that I think about. It's really cool to think about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, but it's a mystery as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, for sure.
Toilet button, I don't know.
Yeah. And so, have you added any new words recently? Are you working on any new concepts or?
So we haven't got a board now because of the move. So when we moved internationally, like we disassembled everything, we moved. Life got very busy. I was traveling internationally a lot. So we didn't have a board for like 6 months. Besides Saffron being a tiny puppy with very little self-control, I wasn't sure that I wanted him like chewing on the button or the boards or the board or anything. So the board is about to get reintroduced now. I am probably going to rebuild from a low number to a large number because it's been a while. And because Saffron doesn't know the buttons. So I might as well use the opportunity to both learn the same buttons in the same locations rather than having a board. But yeah, back in the day, we had a few others. We had Chew, which is his favorite word in the entire world. This favorite word. He's probably looking at me right now. So Chew is his favorite thing. He will request Chew at every possible instant. Whenever he has dinner, he will sort of headrest somewhere on furniture or on my lap or on my arm. And I know that means he wants dessert, which is he wants something to chew on. Loves chewing. He also has he had a train button, which he once used in a very interesting way. I have video of that. So I was training him on nose work, which was a new thing for him. And he found it really hard to use his nose. And then at one point during the nose work exercise, he was like giving up. He was sort of starting to do the wrong thing. And he walked to his boards and pressed train. And I said, yeah, we're training right now. That's good. You're narrating what we're doing. And he was really annoyed at that. He came back. He like toppled some like nose work jar containers over. And he went back to his board and pressed train again very sassily and barked at me, and he came over to me in like full diva behavior, like barking in my face. Austrian Shepherds are very sassy. And I said, okay, I don't think you were narrating. I think you want to do a different kind of training actually. And we then swapped to like obedience training, which is very common, and he was so much happier. So I think what he was trying to say is like, not this training, a different training. This is awful and frustrating.
Oh, I love that. That is so cool. Yeah, that is really cool.
Back into what we were saying with the body language, right? Because if I didn't have the body language,
right.
At first I'm like, oh, great. He's narrating that we're training. That's correct.
Right.
We're training. Good job.
Perfect. Good boy.
Yeah, exactly. But he was
Yeah.
throwing all these behaviors of a dog who's really frustrated. And I'm like, I don't think we're we're narrating the training here. I think we're saying I'm really over this and I want to do something else. Which
Yeah.
I think was what he wanted. So
Yeah. Wow. That is just incredible. So, as you have been involved in buttons, involved in research, involved in an academic community that is arguably very, very skeptical about all this, what have some of the reactions been from friends, family, colleagues? What has that felt like and looked like to you? And how has that changed over time over the last 6 years?
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to talk about, how it's changed. Because when we started doing the research, I think it was just pure skepticism and
Hmm.
just pure get out of there. What are you doing? Why are you working with, citizen science dogs? And these people are not trainers. And like, you're going to get crap data and you're going to get crap results out of it. And then you're going to overblow your claims. But I think that because we've put out research that's very careful and very well controlled experimentally, like the paper in PLOS One, for example, where we're showing that the dogs are responding appropriately to outside and play. There's nothing mind blowing in the results of that paper, right? But that's kind of the point. It's like, look,
Yeah.
we're doing careful science and we're showing that exactly. We're building layers, right? And we're showing that these people who are not professional dog trainers, who are not animal cognition scientists, are getting out there and they're training their dogs and something is working. So this is interesting, full stop, because there's something that's working there. After we started publishing the papers, I feel like the level of criticism has gone down. Like there's still a couple of people in the field that really don't like it. And I don't think they're ever going to like it. I don't think there's anything you can do to make them like it. And that's okay. Science would be a really boring place if everyone had the same opinions all the time, right? It's like
Yeah.
just the dialogue of life. Um, but I have felt that resistance has decreased as they see that we are doing good research and careful research and we're not publishing like crazy, outrageous claims. So I think it's improved a lot. It's a very different perception. Thank you. We can hear your squeak. Can I have that? Can I do that? Um,
Aw.
sorry, Saffron. You can play with the flamingo, which doesn't have a speaker. Okay. The general public have been very different from scientists. From day one in non-dog circles, when I spoke to this, I get into an Uber and they ask you what you do, and then you're like, oh boy, here we go again. We're gonna have to explain this whole button thing. But the general approach from the general audience has been throughout, oh, that's very interesting. And then they tell you something like amazing that their dog does. And I think that's like the best response, right? People are curious about what it is that goes on in dogs' minds. And I think that's a great sort of conversation starter and getting them sort of on board with like, they have really rich inner mental lives and maybe we need to give them more credit than we are. In the sort of dog training community, because I sort of like circulate in these circles as well, I've had like a real mix of opinions. Some people being like, I don't need buttons because I know exactly what my dog wants at all times because I can read dog behavior well. So that's a really odd one. And then others, being more open to it and thinking like, oh, interesting. I don't know that adds any value to my training and like getting my dog to perform behaviors X, Y, Z that I want them to perform. But fair enough. I mean, you scientists probably have some reason to be interested in that, and so there's a real
Yeah.
sort of spectrum on the dog behavior professional side, sort of the dog trainers of the world.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. I'm less involved on the research and academia side than you are, obviously, but I've been in plenty of environments where there's been some prickliness, quite a bit of prickliness. And then from the behavior side, which I am quite involved in, very prickly at the beginning and much less so now. We go to all of the behavior conferences and we are welcomed with open arms and people are excited to have us there. And we have some really good conversations. And obviously there's going to be a mix, right? But I've definitely seen the tide turn. People are more open to it. More guardians are now asking trainers, hey, do you know about like button dogs? Is this something we could teach? And so behavior professionals are having to come on board, right? If they want the clients that want to have their dog or cat use buttons, they have to know a little bit more about that. And I think once they do the research and become a little bit more educated on what it's for, and we've talked a lot about this today, what it's for is to be able to like deepen our connection, have a broader understanding of what our animal companions' needs are, right? Not to like satisfy some sort of anthropocentric need of ours, although it can start that way, it can feel and look that way at first. That's not what it becomes in the end. It really becomes about deepening these bonds, allowing for non-human self-advocacy and engaging in choice agency and control as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, I like to think that too. And I mean, I agree. Sometimes it starts from a place of, oh, what if I could get my dog to, you know, press particular things or, just understand some of the words I'm saying. But then I think it becomes something really much deeper than that. And I've seen that happen over and over again. I mean, you're a prime example. But I've seen it happen in other cases as well, right? Where it begins as something, that's not necessarily for the animal welfare side of things. It might be just like, oh, this would be a fun thing to try. Why not? And then, people realize how much potential it has. And I think
Yeah.
I think it's really cool as well that people realize that by themselves because they are sort of deepening their relationship with their dog. I think that's really interesting and, something we should study as well with the human side of the equation.
I love that. I've loved this entire conversation. Yeah, it's been such a delight to talk to you. And I'm so excited for your lab, for the upcoming research. Obviously, I want to support you in whatever way I can. So please keep me posted on anything that's coming up that you need dogs, cats, ferrets, whatever for. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the only reason I will say, in case people ask, the only reason I don't work with cats, it's not because I don't like cats. It's because I don't know enough about cats. I am allergic to cats, so I can't have a cat, which means I have zero understanding and experience of cat behavior. And I think that it would be a disservice to the field if someone who is not a specialist on cats starts publishing all this stuff on cats, So I think the way for that to happen in my lab, at least, would be for me to bring in a student who is an expert on cats, but I don't have that expertise. That's why it hasn't happened with me yet. But hopefully with someone out there that goes, actually, I really, really, really love cats and I want to do a PhD on like cat soundboard use, reach out to me. That sounds great. However, I'm not the person to do that alone because I just don't have the expertise required.
That would be great. Maybe this is find her.
Yeah, exactly.
Find her. Cat PhD button people. That'd be amazing. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to say for this audience to know or hear?
We've covered a good amount of ground. I'm thinking about. I don't think so, Alex.
Okay. There's one other question I have to ask you that I forgot about. But here's the question. The question is, what is your most controversial opinion about button dogs?
What is my most controversial opinion about button dogs? Let me think on that for a second.
Okay.
My most controversial opinion about button dogs is that I don't know that we're ever going to understand what dogs mean by really, really abstract buttons like I love you. What the heck do dogs make of that? I don't think we're ever going to find out. I don't think that it means I love you. I think it means something else, and we don't know what that is because we have no idea what the dog's experience of the world is and what their experience of love is or whatever their equivalent is. So I don't think that's a question that can be answered by science. That is my most controversial opinion about dog buttons. I don't think we can figure that out.
I love it. And I think that speaks beautifully to the importance of staying curious and not pigeonholing any behavior, word, concept. So much of this is sort of unknowable. And I know that's what you're working towards, knowing little bits and pieces of it. But I think the journey is just as important as the destination here. So
sure.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right.
Subscribe.